Hello students, in the last lesson you learned how to properly identify the different sides of a triangle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to solve for an unknown portion of that vector diagram. All right, so everything that you see on the screen you have to write out. Okay, so just sketch out the diagram and then you need to show your work on how you solve for that last side. In our first diagram, I want you to just make a triangle that looks like question number 1 here. All right, so we'll label each side and then we're going to identify what that unknown variable is, labeled x. Our angle that we're going to say, we'll just say that this is theta, and theta is the angle at which this person, let's say, is going to be walking. If this is my point of origin right here, I know that if I start there, the longest side is going to be the resultant vector, and that's the hypotenuse. So I know that that's the hypotenuse right here, or we would describe that as the resultant. We have to figure out what that value is. So x, what is that value? Well, since we have a right triangle, I know that I can use the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem, you know, is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we're trying to solve for side C because we know that side A, the adjacent side, is going to be right next door to the theta, and that means that side B is going to be the opposite side down here. To rearrange that equation 3 different ways, let's do that right now so that way we don't have to worry about it later. You'd have c equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. If you're solving for side A, you'd have c squared minus b squared. And if you're solving for side B, you'd have the square root of c squared minus a squared. All right, so that tells you how to rearrange that formula to solve for all of your different sides. We're trying to solve for side A. So we're going to put in c, that's this guy right here, equals the square root of, says a squared, a is 5, plus side B, that's 5, calculator time. We're going to put this in here. We'll have square root, parentheses, 5 squared, plus 5 squared, close it up, and you get 7.1. C equals 7.1, and since we're going to describe these as walking, we'll put meters. And then we need a direction because this is a resultant vector, and vectors have both magnitude and direction. The direction that this is pointing in, well, in order to make that red line, we need to have some part of that that's going down and some part of that that's going to the right. So we would describe the red vector, that resultant vector, of having a southeast direction. We don't know the exact angle, but we know it's pointing to the southeast for right now. Okay? So the blue vectors, why did I put those in there? Because some part of that red has to be to the south and some part of that red has to be to the east. Question 2. You have, let's say our angle is down at the bottom this time. So if this is my theta, my angle, that's the point of origin, that means that the longest side, the hypotenuse, is going to be the resultant vector. That again is side C. We'll call that side A. We'll call that side B. So we have C equals the square root of 8 squared plus 12 squared. Time for the calculator. We have square root 12 squared plus 8 squared gets you 14.4. C equals 14.4 meters. We need a direction associated with this now. In order to make up that red vector, we would have, and it's pointing to the northwest, some part of this would have to go up to make that red vector, and some part of this would have to go towards the west to make that red vector. All right, and again, no angle just yet. Question 3, let's say our angle is up here at the top. So that's theta, that's my point of origin. So if that's my point of origin, I find the longest side, the hypotenuse. Side 8 would be the adjacent side. Side x would be your opposite, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So if we're trying to find b, looking back up at our formulas, I have to use this guy right here. Square root of c squared plus a squared. So b equals the square root of 10 squared minus 8 squared. We have square root of 10 squared minus 8 squared equals 6. So we'll have a resultant of 6 meters, and then our direction for this is going to be pointing to the southwest. All right, why is it pointing to the southwest? Because some component had to be towards the south, and some part of that had to be to the west to make up that red vector. At this point, if you know what you're doing with the Pythagorean theorem, labeling up your sides, you can go ahead and just continue with it. You don't have to work with me on the video. What you do have to show is all of your work. You have to sketch out the diagrams on your paper. You have to label the arrows. You have to show your work, and then we have to provide the answer. All right? So to get full credit, you have to provide every bit of this material right here, or this material, or this material for each of those questions. If you don't feel confident doing it on your own, follow with me for the rest. Number 4, we have theta down here, let's say this time. That means that 2 is the adjacent side. We have x is the opposite, we'll call that b. And then we have 4 is the hypotenuse, so that's your resultant vector, side c. We're trying to find b, so again, we're going to have b equals the square root of 4 squared minus 2 squared. We go square root of 4 squared minus 2 squared. Our answer comes up to be 3.5. 3.5 is your magnitude. And then our direction for this, well, in order to make that red vector, I have to be going to the east and north to make that up. So we would say northeast. Question 5, I have my angle. So that tells me that this right here is my point of origin. And then that would then be my resultant because that's the longest vector. That's our hypotenuse, or side C. 3 would be the adjacent side, and x would be the opposite side. So I'm trying to find b. That means that I take the square root of 5 squared minus 3 squared. We have 5 squared minus 3 squared equals 4. So we have 4 meters that this person would have walked. And then we need to get our angle in this. I know it has to go to the right some, and I have to go up to make that red vector. So my direction would be to the northeast. No angle just yet. Question 6. Here is my angle. Theta is right here. So that's my point of origin. The longest side is going to be your resultant vector. That's what we would term the hypotenuse, or side C. Side A then, the adjacent side is 7. Side B is the opposite side, labeled 8 for this. We're trying to find side C, so we have C equals the square root of 7 squared plus 8 squared. We have 8 squared plus 7 squared gets you 10.6. 10.6 meters, and then we need an angle for this. The angle for it, I know it's pointing to the northeast, and I know that because some part of this has to go to the right, and some part of that has to go up in order to make that northeast. southeast direction. Two more. We have number 7. Our point of origin would be right up here because theta is indicated there. That means that the resultant vector is the hypotenuse. We'll call that side C. We know the 5 would have to be the adjacent side, and then the x would have to be the opposite side. We're trying to solve for side B, so we have b equals the square root 13 squared minus 5 squared. We have our calculator. We go square root of 13 squared minus 5 squared. Our answer for that is going to be 12. So 12 meters, and then a direction for this, we would say to the southeast. And we know it's to the southeast because some part of this has to be to the south and some part of this has to be to the east in order to make up the red vector. Last question. We know the point of origin would be right here. So the resultant vector is the longest side. That's going to be your hypotenuse, C. X would be side A, the adjacent side, and 8 would be the opposite side. We'll call that B. We're trying to find side A, or the adjacent side to this. So we'll have A equals the square root of 17 squared minus 8 squared. Hop over to the calculator. Take the square root of 17 squared minus 8 squared, and we get an answer of 15. We have 15 meters, and then our direction for this, in order to get the direction, we would have to go to the west some. We'd have to go to the north some, so that'd be to the northwest. No angle just yet. What you have to provide would be everything that we just went over on the screen. You take a snapshot of your material, and then you submit it to Schoology for credit. In order to get credit, you have to have everything that I wrote down, including the different vectors drawn in there, the angles, the setup for the problems, and your answers. Okay? If you have questions, make sure that you ask.